This is Dan Jurgens, and if you want to have a good time, keep listening to the Krypton Report.
Jason J. Lewis, the voice of Superman on Justice League Action, and you're listening to the Krypton Report.
Hi, this is David Patrick Wilson. I played Superman, Clark Kent, in the television production of It's a Bird, It's a Plane, enjoying every minute of being right here on the Krypton Report.
Look up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane. Look up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane. It's Superman!
Welcome to a Requel Pitch Krypton Report crossover. I kind of pitched this the other day during an episode of Krypton Report, but, we're inundated right now in the new Superman movie, not Supergirl, and James Gunn said that he's looking at doing a Jimmy Olsen spinoff. Okay, awesome. Here we go. I think the Jimmy Olsen spinoff should be a 6-episode miniseries. The first episode, you get all the cast back. Maybe Clark and Lois are in there just for a scene. You definitely get Perry, get Lombard, get Kat, get Ron Troop. And we see the Daily Planet, we see them all together. They each get a scene or whatever, especially with Perry. Jimmy gets an assignment and then leaves. And then the next episodes are all Jimmy Olsen on his assignment, figuring out, maybe it taps into the Jimmy Olsen's dad type past like we've seen in the Triangle Error. Maybe it's Jimmy, and then throughout it, he calls back to the planet, maybe he interacts with Lombard. Troop would be great because he got nothing in the movie, or Cat Grant. And then the last episode is he comes back to the Daily Planet and we see some of the cast again. Just kind of really filling out that world, that character, his story. But since we probably couldn't get a full Daily Planet series spinoff, especially with our Lois and our Clark, I think that would be great, having them at least in an episode, would be awesome. The other one they announced was Mr. Terrific. I think Mr. Terrific, if we take this, he leaves the Justice Gang. We find out that he was part of the Justice Gang because it's something to do with him trying to start Holt's company or whatever, or Maxwell Lord. He needed to look into Maxwell Lord. Maybe Maxwell Lord did a hostile takeover and bought out Holt and doesn't realize that Michael Holt is Mr. Terrific. Don't know all of his history, but let's explore that. Why is he working for Lord? Why? What is Maxwell Lord's role in all this? What's his history? I know that there's been different comics. I know there's a current new Mr. Terrific comic, but let's find out some more about him. What exactly, in the context of the story, is the fair play about? I feel like Superman, this movie, left a lot of questions, and I'm surprised there's not I can't even say it right now, other materials that's filling out this world. I don't know why we're not getting prequel Justice Gang comics or Justice Gang stories. We got the Welcome to Metropolis little book, that junior novel, and Mr. Terrific was appeared in it, which I like. But there wasn't a whole lot in there of really depth. And I just feel like you could really be filling in the gaps with some of this stuff. Because who knows when we'll get these characters in another movie. Now we know Peacemaker's coming next month. And we're supposed to be getting at least a cameo, small scene between the Justice Gang members and Christopher Smith. So we'll see.
Welcome to the Requel Pitch Podcast. That's right, I'm Tyler. What's up? And as of this recording, we're going to be talking about one option maybe for James Gunn's Superman 2025 second film. That's right, I'm pitching a sequel. And like I said, it could be one option. It's one I got cooking in the brain. Okay? As we know, it's 2025, and this movie's coming out. And we're kicking off right now filming Supergirl, which is for 2026. So why not shoot for 2027 and have Superman and Supergirl together in one film? Now, this is a fun pitch based off an idea, having no knowledge exactly how the Supergirl story is going to play out, because we know it's based off Woman of Tomorrow, but I don't think it'll be a literal one-to-one translation of that property. So, and, you know, my thought is, since we're approaching Superman, as of this pitch, we haven't seen Superman yet. It's coming. That's why I say this is the first pitch, because this is kind of a cool idea, and then I'll critique it, okay? So, we don't have Brainiac as a villain, and everybody wants Brainiac as a villain. So why not base a Superman, Supergirl off the Jeff Johns Brainiac storyline? The one that inspired the film, animated film that is, of Superman Unbound. You have Superman and Supergirl. The pieces are all there. You know, even Injustice 2 has the flashback scene of Brainiac attacking Krypton. And that's how you would open the film, was Brainiac attacking Krypton, a young Kara. You could even have Kal-El escape at the same time, and it's right after Brainiac takes Kandor, the planet explodes. Boom. Retweak the origin for you, James. Okay? Enthralling, exciting. You can deal with things like these super-powered people having post-traumatic stress disorder. And one of the best was in Superman Unbound. And it's been a while since I've actually read the comic, so I can't tear apart the two right now. There are differences in the story beats and how it plays out. And, of course, I would want the adaptation because I don't want a one-to-one translation. But the idea is, one of the best lines is, Supergirl states how powerless she felt, but now on Earth she has powers to fight back. And I think this would be the best story to have our team up of seeing Superman and Supergirl with Krypto together. Something that we've all want to see. And having them in a movie together, first of all, would be amazing. But then we get to factor in Brainiac, the villain that we've all wanted. So how cool is that, right? And I mean, there's not a whole lot to pitch because the story's there, because they're both in the story. You know, I think the biggest thing's going to come about how we approach Supergirl in it, because having not seen Woman of Tomorrow, and I'll probably revisit this, we don't know if she's been to Earth, her history with Earth, or if, you know, everyone speculates that she'll be some sort of post-credit scene in Superman. And I wanted to kind of do this pitch idea before seeing the film. And I think that's what's important, is to get the idea out there. But I think it's the best story to build a foundation to lean into a team-up movie. You know, as much as going into Superman with different heroes of the DC universe is awesome, but getting to see the cousins together, you know, something that was teased in the Supergirl movie in the past, something that was teased in the Flash, but finally getting to see them together would be really something cool. Now, it would be even more neat if there's some way we could get a Superboy, but that's probably asking too much. You know, but seeing Supergirl and Superman together, that would be something pretty cool. And Brainiac, the villain that we all want and need, would be pretty amazing. But that is my pitch for now. Like your comments or post your comments in the bottom. Hey guys, this is a Requel Pitch update. Okay, so I'm dropping this at the same time I'm dropping my pitch for Superman 2. Having now seen Superman, I just wanted to take my same pitch and make an adjustment to it and add some more details. Okay, so if you haven't listened to my first pitch for Superman 2, go check it out, and then this one right after. So here we go. Same basic concept, but the idea is the first 15 minutes of the movie starts, boom. Movie opens up with Jor-El running, okay? The planet's under attack. It's Brainiac, okay? We learned that Brainiac's the reason why Krypton exploded, okay? Jor-El comes in, he says, it's time, we gotta go now. He takes off his red cape, he wraps his baby in it, they put it in the rocket. While they're putting the rocket, monitor comes on, it's his brother, it's Zor-El. It's the first time we see the brothers' introduction. They're talking to each other. Zor-El's yelling that Kandar's being taken, that there's something around, that they can't get out. And we see that he had just blasted Kara off. And boom. We see the rocket go off for Cal. We see Kandar taken by Brainiac. We see the planet explode. And then we follow Cal for a second and we see his ship go. It crashes. Boom, cuts to modern day. We see Superman stopping either like a natural disaster or maybe something like downtown, gun shootout, bank robbery. We meet Maggie Sawyer, Dan Turpin as he helps the police. Goes back to the fortress. Kara shows up having just finished her adventure in her solo film. What we learn is Brainiac's been on Earth for a little while. He arrived and he's taken like one of his pod type forms where it's basically a nanovirus that's infected a person that he's operating through while his ship is on its way to Earth. And that person's infiltrated the government and actually has been working with Lex, who's in Belle Reef. Then it follows the same basic plot line as before. But then what we do is what we learn in this is Cal and Kara are able to go into Kandor when they get on Brainiac's ship, meeting Zor-El. Cal gets to meet Zor-El and talk to him. Zor-El is then able to access the video file of Kal-El's parents, and he sees the truth. And it was because of Brainiac's technology that we didn't know about that was actually there in the first film that actually made the video authentic, and we learned the true message of what his parents said to him when he was sent to Earth. Kind of pulling a thread of how he ended the first film with him basically making his own choices, but in this one we learned that Jor-El and Lara did send him to be safe and to use his abilities to help people. And he learns that through Zor-El. Now, I know that Zor-El is supposed to appear in Supergirl, so I might have to retweak this after Supergirl. But that's my update to Superman 2, my pitch. Enjoy. Welcome to the Requel Pitch podcast. I'm your host, Tyler, the Superman of Blue. Excuse me for that cough. Yep, I'm getting over it. I'm making this pitch early on because one of my things is I want to say my thoughts before too much information comes out. And before you're like, Tyler, you're already pitching the third movie in this trilogy of Superman films? Well, yeah. And here's why. This comes from two things. One from my daughter, one from a quote from James Gunn. James Gunn recently stated that certain projects that they had announced they were working on for DC are kind of reshuffling and working on. One being The Authority. And he said, in a world with the boys, it's kind of hard to really find a place for The Authority. And I thought about that. Now, my daughter, the other day we were filming something, and I said, just go grab me a comic book off my shelf. Well, she went in my box, grabbed one, and it was the first issue of Superman and the Authority by Grant Morrison. So I thought about it in this sense. Superman 3 is Superman versus the Authority. And I think, because of what James Gunn said, and based on that book, I think you make the Authority because you're already introducing the Engineer. And that's really why we're using more of this idea of the Authority. But in that Superman and the Authority, Manchester Black is in it. And you make the film based off at the heart of it, whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow, or not that, sorry, whatever happened to Truth, Justice, and the American Way, or the animated Superman versus the Elite. And that is where, but you use kind of the authority, and if The Boys is a parody of like DC and Marvel, let's make kind of this reverse on The Boys. And I say that because I think at the heart, The Boys is a good show, but it is a hard R-rated show. And I know that there are people who would like the message and the ideas that's presented there, but do not like the presentation. And if you kind of do the same thing, but present it in this PG-13 kind of way, so that you can sell this ideas to children, and help them understand this concept of being accountable and what a force of people who have no accountability look like, and really how powerful and strong Superman's code of morality really is. Now, some of these themes may be hinted at and presented in James Gunn's Superman. I do not know. But I'm just saying you kind of blend the authority and the elite together as one kind of idea entity. We know how they take comics and they mix them and they make them different for film, and it's not always a one-to-one translation. So, you do this story, and I will probably revisit this pitch as we progress with James Gunn's Superman the Universe, because not having a lot to go off of for what his Superman will be, as far as what the story entails, characters and details and all that, you can come up with and you make a solid pitch. Much like, my pitch for 2 was based on the idea that they're already doing a Superman and a Supergirl, and we have not got Brainiac, and my idea was to do that story for the second movie and make it a Superman and Supergirl movie. And then this would be, the third Superman film. Once again, him standing on his own. I think that's very, very important. As much as I like the way that James Gunn is able to bring together groups of people, and how this film launches, Superman has Hawk Girl and Green Lantern and everything. That's great. It's cool. It's neat. Whatever. I think what's so pure about Superman versus the Elite, and I say versus the Elite because James, my co-host on Krypton Report, my Superman-based podcast that I do, we reviewed the film. We did a commentary. It's been years since we actually reviewed the film of Superman versus the Elite in December of it was in February of 2024. Apologies. Trying to remember everything we've done. And that was the first podcast I had ever done, and how important that story is about lone Superman standing up against these powerful forces. Now, I think Superman standing up against the Elite by himself is what we need to see in a type of third Superman film. We've already done so much with Krypton and across Superman in all media, that if we did a film series that focused more on character and value and what he represents, would be very interesting. With, like I said, this film being your kind of final staple of where the world is going, and the importance of Superman could be awesome. Just, but like I said, I think that there's hints of maybe that idea. If there's hints of those themes in the first film, then you really use those themes in a third film. I think you got something like a solid Superman trilogy. And you get to have more characters by having the authority in there. And like I said, you mix it with a Manchester Black, maybe the Engineer returns, bring in Midnighter. I wouldn't do Apollo, maybe tease Apollo. I feel like his powers are too much similar to Superman's, and not sure, but I'm not sure who my team would be at this moment. Because I could see it being very much the way Marvel, as of this recording,
we're preparing for the release of the Thunderbolts here in a little over a month and a half, whatever. And my buddy Brian is, he's like, oh, that's not really the Thunderbolt team. That team, there's a lot of people who are on the Thunderbolts. This was the original team. And I get it. This is the MCU version of the Thunderbolts, where they've taken these characters they've created and put them on a team. And I kind of see that a little bit, how we could get the Authority, where we have characters who are in the comic, the Authority, but then we have characters who have been introduced or are characters of the comic universe that we want to put in here that fills a certain type of, not demographic, but ideology, that you put in there. What does each one of these characters represent? So I think you have the foundations for a really good film there. Now, the only other thing I would say with the development of this new universe, I wouldn't mind seeing a Justice League film before the third Superman film. And this isn't going back towards like the Marvel model or anything, but let's think about the forgotten film Iron Man 3. Iron Man 3 was about putting Tony back into like the cave and kind of Tony relying on his wits and his ability. You have Superman with a team, which is the Justice League, do some battle, and then he has this team of friends, and then you have him on his next time we see him, it's back to him just by himself. I think that just helps prove a point of more of the importance of Superman, not as much as just the hero, physical powers, but just what he represents in the ideology, the truth and hope, the better tomorrow, kindness, compassion, just goodness, and coming over, that there is light in the world, there is good in the world, and there is virtue, and there is all the things that we wish were real. Like this meme I saw said, sitting around wishing that Superman was real, or standing up and going out and representing the values and ideology that he represents. And I think you show that in this film. And if you've not seen the animated Superman versus the Elite, check it out. If you've read the comic that it's based off by Joe Kelly, Whatever Happened to Truth, Justice, and the American Way, read that. There are differences. It has been a while since I've read that, so I do need to revisit it to further this pitch. And of course, I would streamline a little bit. There's some things in the Elite, like with the interdimensional ship and stuff they have. I kind of would cut that out. I like this really mix of the sci-fi element is Superman and the characters with powers, but it feels real and down to earth because they are, on our planet, and there's not like spaceships and things like that as well. But that is my pitch for Superman 3 of the James Gunn universe. Superman versus the Authority. And yes, I would put versus in there because it is a battle between not only physically, but of the moral consciousness of people. So that's my thought. Let me know in the comments below. Going to get this out and enjoy Superman. Check out Krypton Report. Let me know your thoughts on the new film or just anything in general. And if you have an idea for a sequel or a pitch or a movie that you're like, man, what I'd really like to see, send me an email, jtypatrick@gmail.com, or just leave it in the comments below.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another pitch in the car, part of the Requel podcast series here on my YouTube. I'm just sitting here thinking about Superman, and the movie's coming out, and on my base podcast, the Krypton Report, James and I years ago did a pitch for what our Superman sequel would be, and this was right at the time of BVS, before Justice League, and our pitch was on what could have been in between BVS and Man of Steel. And I've hinted at this pitch over time of what my Superman movie would be. Now, with James Gunn's new film approaching, I just thought I'd go ahead and pitch my idea just to get it out there and talk about it. So here we go. We know that James Gunn's film is not an origin story. When it was originally discussed and pitched, it was Superman Legacy, which I like the idea of that title because I just feel like it gives it some sort of, reboot. But at the same time, my pitch for a film was always just Superman, because we all know that the first film with Christopher Reeve was Superman the movie, and it's often referred to as either Superman the movie or Superman 78. Now the new film is just Superman, and it's also being, Superman 25, and I feel like it's hard sometimes to just say Superman, because it is the name of the character. Like, we'll throw it over, like Batman has been called, Batman 89. Even though there's no other movie named Batman, it's just in the, the discussion, 89 or Batman 89 is taken over. And then we have the Batman, which is fine because the distinguishes it. Now, the Superman would not work. But I always, if I'm going to do a reboot, it's going to be titled Superman. Plain and simple. So that was my operating name title for a while. But my idea is taking from two of the most popular, more current continuity and non-continuity, I guess, depending on where you're coming from, origin books. Being Superman Birthright and Jeff Johns' Superman Secret Origins. So you have two great prolific writers, Mark Waid and Jeff Johns, that I'm really going to pull for my story. And I'm also going to say if there's a film reference, it would be, I think Superman Man of Tomorrow actually does really well in my idea mode, okay? My pitch would start as Clark is a young boy, about 8, maybe 10 years old. He's sitting in a wheat field or a recently harvest.
Onto I-75 North.
He's sitting in a recently harvested cornfield or wheat field with his dog, Shelby. And they're watching the sunrise. And he's sitting out there and he hears something in the distance, and it's a car screeching, and he takes off and runs. And what it is Lana Lang and her family driving early in the morning before school, and they're in a car wreck, but we see Clark show up and save everybody before anyone's hurt, and Lana kind of sees him a little, and then he runs off, and then we cut to Jonathan and Martha in the home yelling upstairs, "Clark, time to get up for school." And he comes in the back door and his clothes are torn and dirty, and he's like, "Let me explain." And they're both like looking at him kind of shocked. And then it says title Superman. And then we cut to him on a bus in Africa as a young early 20s journalism student. And this is where I'm borrowing from Birthright. I love the part in the early Birthright, I've talked about this before, is I love Birthright, and I like the ending a lot, but I also am going to borrow from the idea of a small scale. And we'll talk about that as I get into this more. But this is where we have the Kobe situation, where Clark is in Africa watching this man rise as a political leader, and he's studying journalism. We see that he's a college student, but he's online. I really think that with today's technology, I think Clark being an online student gives him a little bit of an anonymity and a little bit of detachment too. So it allows him to travel and explore and do his studies and his work anywhere in the world. And we see him corresponding and writing for freelance for different papers and the school paper and things, and sending articles in, and especially what he's covering here. And the scene would play out much like it does in the book, with Clark witnessing the horrible assassination on Kobe, and it really ignites in Clark this stronger desire to step out and do something more, because here was just a man who was standing up, knowing that he was, in debt, and he could be murdered, and it happens, and Clark kind of reveals his powers and stuff during when Kobe, is shot, but Kobe, hits at, hey, save other people, and Clark does it, and then through Kobe's death, the people are able to rise up, overthrow the warlord, and it's Kobe's sister that takes on the mission. Then Clark returns to the farm, and while returning to the farm, similar beats like Birthright, where he starts, he is approaching graduation, and he's looking for a job. Both the Kents would be alive, throw that out there, and he's trying to decide how he wants to help people. And he wants to help people, and he's going to go to the city, and it's him, his dad, and Martha, on the farm, talking about how to disguise, how to walk, posture, the glasses, the hair, everything he does, and that's how they start to develop his disguise. He'll also have a run-in with Lana Lang, and it'll pull a little bit from Superman for All Seasons, with their conversation about her once she knew, and about the history of how Clark and Lana were always best friends who were attracted to each other, but just couldn't make it work. There was always a little hesitancy, but they have this deep feelings for each other. And Lana was the first person he ever told about his powers, and she helps, talk to him about his future plan of what he's going to do. So then we go to Metropolis, when we have a little bit, I think, a cool scene of like montage almost, much like pulling this from Superman Earth 1, where we see that Clark is a very intelligent kid, young man, okay? He is smart. He can almost get any job he wants. His grades were high, and he's going in for these interviews, and he knows he can do these jobs, but he's turning them down because it's not about the job, it's not about the money, it's about the purpose of the job. And he has, of course, his journalism degree, and it's hard getting a break in the newspaper game and with news and resource, and we're seeing people that will reflect the modern day, situations we have with news and technology. And Clark is trying to get in, and I think it would be great if, he meets Jimmy Olsen. They bump into each other, trying to get a story. Clark is, there watching. We have kind of our mid-action point where Clark does something to save somebody small. Kind of like in Superman, or the New Adventure, kind of like in Lois and Clark, when Clark stops the bus, leaves the handprint kind of thing. Something along those lines. Runaway buses are always great for Superman, saving some people, and he's without trying to be seen. And he makes a friendship with Jimmy, and Jimmy's looking for a roommate, and Clark and him start to form a friendship. And then Jimmy, he's working as freelance, trying to sell pictures to the different newspapers. He had an offer for the Daily Planet. They bought one of his pictures, and then, of course, towards the end of the film, Jimmy gets the best perfect picture of Superman, and he leverages that for a staff job at the Daily Planet. And then we would meet, so Clark would then try to go with Jimmy to see about kind of doing the same thing through articles. And that's where we meet Lois. Big brash scene with her and Perry. Lois is, this is where I pull from Superman, Man of Tomorrow, young reporter. Not very well known. She's on her up and up, trying to make a name. She's at the bottom of the barrel, and we get to see that her dad's in town with one of his military soldiers, John Corbin. This is where I pull from the latter half,
1 mile.
where he's in town, and this is, like I said, where I pull from Secret Origins. John is kind of the ideal son that Sam has, soldier, military man. But of course, John does have a past. We learn throughout that, he was juvenile delinquent, but he got off with the because of his intelligence and record. He was given an opportunity to either, basically jail or military service. He joined the military at 18, right as he turned 18, and has had an exceptional military record. And we see Lois rejecting John and his, advances that romantic relationship. One thing I always liked in Secret Origins, I do like that the second half, because if you look at that book, the first half is like a Clark story, the Legion, and then it's a Metropolis. But I like the smaller scale. And that's one big thing that I want to hit on in my pitch, is I do not want this big alien invasion. I do not want this big brass battle of epicness. One superhero film that I have a big respect for, and I referenced this in my pitch for Wonder Woman 3 years ago, which I need to put back up on Requel, was The Wolverine. Because it was a personal story and the stakes were smaller, but yet you still felt the emotional and the impact and what needed to be done. So here is what I'm talking about, is we're introducing this superpowered hero. Now if you're asking me, Tyler, what about Krypton? No. I would completely leave Krypton out of my first film. My first film is the origin, smaller scale, and Clark has some idea that he's an alien. I mean, he knows he's an alien, okay? He's had that conversation with his parents. He has the ship. But he doesn't have the fortress yet. He hasn't really plugged into the ship yet, and we'll get there. So Clark is, has a meeting with Perry, and kind of gets the same spiel we've seen in other places with, can't afford it, can't do it, but if you can bring me something, maybe I'll print it, okay? Definitely have my Daily Planet staff. I think that's one thing that Gunn is doing that I'm very much looking forward to. Lombard, Troop, Cat, definitely would have my Daily Planet rounded out. So Clark is now set up there. So he's trying to figure out a story, and he doesn't want to write about himself. As there's whispers of this big save that happened, and Jimmy's talking about it, he's like, I got pictures, and he really didn't get any pictures of anything. So what happens is, on the other side now, is we do have Lex Luthor. I think Lex Luthor is an amazing villain. I think he's an awesome antagonist because of what he represents. I would pull from the idea of everybody looking up at Lex. Nobody looks up in Metropolis except when Lex Luthor is sitting outside his tower. Everyone else, people's heads are down. And when Clark shows up, he's got that wide-eyed country boy in the city looking up and everything. We've seen that in the comics. Definitely going to have that in my film. But I would have Lex as this, he's the faux savior in the sense of, look to me to be saved. We learned that most everything in Metropolis is either owned or part of LexCorp, as he helped build the city of tomorrow. I always thought that using establishing shots and wide shots and imagery from Dubai would be great, because so much of Dubai looks futuristic in their buildings. For Metropolis, to really give it this city is something, because Lex Luthor set up shop there and he has built this city up, and we have to have Lex as the egomaniac and everything he is, to where he is a villain, but the greatest thing is the cat and mouse between Superman and Lex, where so many people of the city look at Lex as the hero, as a great man, and you can't prove that he is doing the shady stuff that we all know that he is, because he's sneaking. His company has been working with chemicals and compounds, and eventually the villain would be Parasite. I think Parasite is a great villain to put Superman as a very kind of humanistic villain, where he has to battle without powers as well as with powers. I liked the idea of keeping it small. Once again, I thought about, again, in Secret Origins, there's Parasite appears and so does Metallo. I like seeding Metallo, and what I would do is I would have Metallo show up, but he wouldn't be kryptonite powered. He would be more just exoskeleton suit Metallo, John Corbin, who would fight Superman, because kryptonite would not appear till the end of the film after, you know what? All right, scratch that. I got this. Kryptonite is discovered because when Clark goes back home, he activates the ship. The ship then gives him the crystals and stuff, and what happens is it activates and creates kind of an energy. The energy pulse makes it so the kryptonite can be is irradiated or discoverable, and we find that Lex in his lab has a bunch of meteor rocks from different things, and it comes alive, and the kryptonite all of a sudden starts taking on a different form, and Lex is experimenting with it and uses it as a power source to power the suit, but then later basically has to use it to power John Corbin after his first battle in the suit, where then he becomes more of Metallo Terminator style. We've talked about this before on the animated series. And, you have your big battle with Superman coming out and fighting Corbin, because everyone's scared of this man, the Superman, who is powerful, and what does he do, and what's he here for? And, we have this, not uneasiness, but no, people aren't sure what to make of him, but everything he does is good. Like when he has his big, the big night reveal where he reveals himself, it's all like a montage of saving different things, much like we've seen in Superman the movie, because I think that is a great, just a great thing to have. But what he does is he goes back home, and when he's there with the ship, he finds, and I'm going to borrow from the New 52. I'm sorry, people, I know people hate this, and I'm going to borrow from My Adventure with Superman. He finds the emblem that recognizes him, his DNA, and he puts it on, and it grows, and he gets his suit, kind of a nanobot alien tech suit. All right, the cape is already there as a cape. It is in his as used as a blanket, and we'll touch on that here in a moment. And then Martha, just like in My Adventure, says something has to break up all this blue, and she makes the trunks. So there's Martha's contribution to the costume. All right, everybody with me? So he has the costume now. He goes back, and he starts acting. He starts being a visual, because the city needs hope. They need someone to believe in. They need something, and there's nothing as great as a helicopter. I was thinking of some sort of bank robbers, right? Inter-gang bank robbers. Okay, they don't have all the tech yet. They're just inter-gang before the tech, robbing a bank, and this is where the police are in pursuit. We have Turpin and Sawyer en route, and while this is going on, there's helicopters coming in and everything from the news, the different news, and what happens is we see that there's actually a drone that's coming in to pick up the money or pick up the bank heist and fly them away, and big action set piece. And the helicopters actually end up getting damaged by the drone, and this is what puts Superman into action. He flies in, he saves the helicopter, saves, of course, Lois on a helicopter, you have to do it. He saves her, she gets her first look, but he's moving too fast for pictures. Jimmy gets a blurry shot, have to. Classic, right? And he saves it. He flies in. He stops the bank robbers, and then he has a conversation with Sawyer and Turpin. And they're both, who are you? What are you here? And he's like, I'm a friend. I'm here to help. And he flies off. And people now are like looking up and watching. Like, what to make of this? Who is this person? And of course, you have all the news organizations try to get a picture. And it's a frenzy. Lex trying to prove it's a hoax. And then he's talking about, his super soldier and serum. No, I can't use that. But Lex is trying to talk about what they're doing at LexCorp to make humans great and improve lives, and the Superman thing, whoever the savior is, it's not real. But then through an accident, we have Parasite, and Parasite appears, and Parasite, is Rudy Jones. I like the very, Rudy's a good guy, janitor, just trying to work, tragic figure. And he seeks out Superman because he senses the power. So then we have, Clark gets sick, and there's some awkwardness. Jimmy, I will have, figures it out. Being Clark's roommate, and he helps Clark as Clark gets sick. Jimmy figures it out. And the big confrontation was after Superman had battled Metallo in Metallo's regular armor, and Lex has put the kryptonite in him and all this. It's messed with John's brain. It's brought out his dark side, his ego, to where now he's a threat. And I would have Metallo. I'm wrestling with this, okay? So don't take this as a finite. But I would almost have that in our third act, Parasite goes for Metallo. And I would do Parasite more, not the creature where he looks like some sort of alien, like xenomorph looking thing, but he looks more like a man who is seeking energy. And I'll play around with the creature design, but Metallo almost killed Parasite by the poisoning of the kryptonite to him, because kryptonite's poisonous to humans. And, like I said, Rudy would very much be a tragic figure in this. And just kind of show the craziness of where John is going. And then, of course, he's in downtown Metropolis, and there's civilians getting damaged, and Superman comes, and he's hurt, and he's weak on power, but he still is able to stop Corbin. And he, like I said, he poses for the photo with Jimmy. And we get that. And then Lois names him Superman. And it's in the paper, and Jimmy gets a job. And Clark gets a job as an intern. Okay, Clark gets a job, very minimal, and he's still trying to pitch stories to Mr. White. And then, at the end of the film, we just see Clark flying out of Metropolis, and he's standing looking at his ship, and he turns it on, and he kind of faces more of he wants to learn more about the ship, because part of Clark's internal conflict has been afraid of who he really is. And the theme of this story, as I iron out all the details, is accepting who you are, embracing who you are. And it's a common theme. And it's a common theme amongst this style of character and everything. But I think with what Clark's going through, it would work really well. So that's kind of my pitch for Superman. Now, my sequel, because I feel like it has to work like this, my sequel is where we open with Krypton. We go back, we see Krypton, we see Jor-El, and my second film is my sci-fi adventure. This is my big film, okay? This is where we learn of Krypton. We see the rocket, and to pull from the New 52, we see Jor-El take his cape off that he wore and wrap his son in it. So that the cape that Clark wears is Jor-El's cape. I love that. And send him to Earth. And we see, and this is about Clark learning from the ship in the sequel, the fortress would be built. And this is the one where we have your Kryptonian invasion kind of thing. This is the one where, and it's hard because we have had Zod now on film twice in a very similar storyline. Of course, I don't know what would happen. So I'm torn between the idea of Zod and Brainiac. I want Brainiac in live screen, but I think Brainiac is the scariest villain when you think about how much of our world today relies on computers and systems, and Brainiac can stop all of that and take over everything we have on Earth. And I think Brainiac would be the better villain for the second one. And yes, we will do Brainiac for the second film. And Brainiac comes, and he's already on Earth. He's a businessman also, and it's a company that's trying to take over LexCorp or merge. It's been buying up other companies and is a tech mogul that almost rivals Lex Luthor. And that would be part of like building up this trust for Superman. And then Brainiac comes out as this alien AI device. And you know what? I would even touch on our obsession with AI now and apps. And Brainiac is an app we all have on our phone that we use much like Siri and Alexa. And then it all turns against us. And you have Superman trying to protect, save, and stop this. And like I said, this is just the off the top of my head pitch for the sequel. But I always like the idea of the sequel being more of the sci-fi, big battle, alien invasion type thing. To where, because one of my issues with Man of Steel is, because of how it plays out, you can almost hate Superman because he brought the Kryptonians there. Superman the movie does it right by having the Kryptonians show up in the second one. After that, he's already built goodwill with people. And that's the same kind of beat that I'm going for. But instead of using Zod or any of that, I'm using Brainiac as this alien that reveals himself. And he's kind of playing the humanoid version of Brainiac versus we will have two versions of Brainiac, basically. More of like the green biohuman that we've seen recently, like in Jeff Johns' Brainiac. And then more of the just cold robot that we've seen before. Because the cold robot is what the world is seeing as this alien entity that has arrived because of it's heard of the Superman or whatever, and it's here to help. And then after that robot's destroyed, we will eventually meet the real Brainiac, much like Brainiac Attacks. And going back to like this plays into Krypton's origin, is we will then get the bottled city of Kandor, where Clark will learn some more of Krypton. But what the difference I would have here is inside the bottled city is Zor-El and Zod. And during the machinations of the film, Zod escapes and is able to, like I said, the machinations, Zod grows full height and everything. It can be something as simple as if someone were to get out of the bottle, they would regain their size, okay? And set up Zod for a third film. Now, light pitch on the third film, and I think my second film would be called like The Man of Tomorrow, Superman the Man of Tomorrow, something like that, keeping with that flow and how Superman's kind of replaced Lex in people's eyes, but Lex is always trying to find a way to outdo Superman because Lex will be in all three movies because he is an antagonist that's always finding ways to force himself in and create things. Now, my third film was Zod showing up. I would pull from back to J. Michael Straczynski's Earth 1 series, Volume 3, I believe. I haven't read them in a while, and the last time I did, I read them all at the same time. Where Zod shows up, and he starts to play off as benevolent. He aligns with countries and people that don't like Superman without really giving away who he is. And then when he does meet Kal-El, he really does pitch to him as a brother, a friend, and he represents to Kal-El a Kryptonian connection. Kal-El has no idea what to do about the bottle city of Kandor that he has in the fortress, or who's in there, because everyone's in stasis, frozen. Zod escaped, like I said, through machinations in the second film.
Take exit 192 on the left to merge onto I-475 north toward Maumee.
So, continuing with that, Zod presents himself as the savior. He wins over Kal-El's trust. They're buddies, and he's excited because he finally has a connection to Krypton, where he doesn't feel as alone. And part of the theme for this is realizing that family and belonging isn't always about your people, but you can find it with people that care about you, and making your own people, your own tribe, your own squad, whatever term you want to use, to where he has Jimmy, who's his best friend. He has Lana, and then through the movies, we're building up the Clark and Lois love story. And I would have them get together at the end of the second film. They kiss for the first time, and then the third film, he reveals that he's Superman to her, and that'd be part of the plot in this, as he really wants to be fully embraced by the people that he loves. And we have, him versus Zod, but Zod represents something because Zod is doing things in the background to try and discredit Superman, make him look bad. When Zod reveals that he's actually a Kryptonian to the world, he comes as this benevolent Kryptonian who tries to use imagery and stories and stuff and basically painting Jor-El and his family as what Zod was on Krypton, and trying to win the world over. And that is part of the plot so it's down to Clark versus Zod in a big battle. Superman versus Zod as the Superman versus the anti-Superman, and Zod wanting to use his powers to rule. And then this is where we pull back to that John Corbin, who's been in prison and been trying to be rehabilitated. And this is where I would go back and I would start pulling. I would have Corbin appear in a small scene where Superman visits him in prison. And for Corbin's storyline here, I'd start pulling from what Philip Kennedy Johnson did, where we learn more about his tragic bout where, he did have problems because he was a juvenile youth, but he protected his sister, and he loved his sister, and his sister would be at play. And his sister's like, John, you have to help. And it would be Corbin that would show up and actually help defeat Zod and protect Superman and kind of redeem himself. And then die in the battle because he would basically explode the kryptonite, killing Zod, and Superman would be, hurt, but we would save Superman, and Corbin would go and die a hero, completing an arc. And one of the other things I would do is I would integrate Star Labs and start that in the second one, because the second one is more of my big sci-fi space odyssey film that would incorporate, like I said, a lot more of the Krypton storyline as Clark discovers things through the fortress being built out of the ship and everything like that. That is my pitch kind of that's been circling in my head for Superman, like my Superman film series. And I wanted to get that out there before we learn too much about what Gunn has in store. And I look forward to the new film, and I look forward to anyone's thoughts. I know this is a little bit longer of a story pitch, but I'm discussing a trilogy that's kind of been in my brain for a little while. Let me know your thoughts. Subscribe to Requel. Check out our Krypton Report podcast on all podcast platforms. And we do a $1 Patreon where we review movies, we commentate, and have special $1 Patreon shows. $1 gets you a bunch of content every month from James, myself, and whoever joins us for all the fun. So take care. Hello, and welcome to another Pitch in the Car. I'm Tyler. How's it going? Welcome to the Requel Pitch podcast. I am recording this about a year out, but it'll be out in time, and I'm wondering about something, but we'll see. But today I'm pitching something a little different than I usually pitch. Usually I'm pitching films. I think Solomon and I have pitched a game a couple times, but today I'm pitching a book, a novel to be exact. Currently, DC has released two novels that are based on the Batman '89. They are supposed to be sequels and prequels to from Batman to Batman Returns. And there's also the Batman '89 comic, which is weird because it was supposed to be kind of a sequel. But I don't know if it's supposed to be a sequel to '89 or a sequel to Batman Returns. I kind of think of it now as being more of a sequel to Batman Returns, because Catwoman appeared. As of this recording, I have not read Echoes because I was waiting for every issue to drop on the app. But like I said, this is a year out. But I bring this up because there's this resurgence of these novels and they seem to be doing well. And we've also got the Superman 78 comic series. We've gotten 2 volumes of that. The Iron Curtain one I liked better. I don't hate the first one, the Brainiac story, but I don't like the idea of him going into Krypton, to Krypton, and seeing his parents. His parents, no, they died. But there hasn't been any more announcements for either Superman or Batman for a 3rd volume of these comics. So with that, I'm thinking, okay, why not give us a novel that we wanted from the Superman films that would have been, don't just do like Superman quote unquote 5 or whatever, but give us a novel that would have been the meeting of Superman and Supergirl. That's right. In the Helen Slater Supergirl film, you see a poster of Superman, which is just a giant picture of the Christopher Reeve Superman blown up, one of the production stills. And we meet Jimmy Olsen, and Supergirl somehow has knowledge. That's my cousin. And I think you could fill in some of the gaps of like how she knew about her cousin. You could open up with what Argo City went through with the destruction of Krypton and how that all came about. And then it picks up where Superman learns about Kara's adventures, especially from Jimmy. Like you could have a really great scene after your opening of Superman at the Daily Planet, and Jimmy comes back like, "Gee, Mr. Kent, you gotta see this. There's a Supergirl. I wonder if Superman knows about this." And he's like, "Yeah, Jimmy, that's a good idea. Oh, I need to my stomach. I'll be back, Jimmy." And you have Superman meeting Kara. What does that do? Okay. Um, in modern comics, Kara's story has been tied a lot to Brainiac with Superman. Brainiac, I did pitch that film last year as my sequel to 2025's Superman and a sequel to 2026's Supergirl as a movie for them together, kind of this hybrid sequel. But where would the novel go? Now, Supergirl, the film, was done more like a fantasy fairy tale. It is very light and hearty. There's some weird stuff in it. We've done 2 commentaries on it. The last one was great because it was me, James, Jania, and Jamie all watching and doing it together. And it was really fun to do. Now, the novel, if we're taking place, we kind of explored magic. Where would we go with a villain? What is a villain that the Christopher Reeve Superman and Supergirl should fight together? We're not going to take Brainiac off the table. Done. Even Metallo. Done. Okay? So who is really left that you could
feasibly see being done or attempted at this time. Give you a minute to think about it. Okay? Truth is, I don't know the villain yet. I know beats I like of the story, but I haven't figured out quite the antagonist of the story. But I will. But what you can have is you can use Argo City because it's supposed to be an inner space, right? Shrunk, whatever. It's kind of Candor. And you could have Supergirl and Clark, like Supergirl at the fortress with him. And, we had that horrible CGI scene in The Flash of Helen Slater and Christopher Reeve Superman. That, I mean, granted, look, there's been some advances in digital doubles and digital figures and rendering and deep faking stuff, but those just looked straight up like CG. Like, it was bad. And so there was an Earth out there that they connected. And, part of Superman trying to bring Argo City out big. He's at the fortress. So we can explore a little bit more of the fortress. Which is interesting because if you look at Superman 3 and 4, there's really no fortress. And if you're looking at, like, trying to make everything work in continuity, so you have Superman 78 film, Superman the movie, Superman 2, Superman 78 the 2 books, Superman 3, and Superman 4, kind of making it all one big adventure. This could fall in place if you wanted to, if you think about where Supergirl the movie came out. This could be like before Superman 3, before Superman 4. So he's still in the fortress. Martha hasn't passed away yet. That's a thing in Superman 4, is Clark visiting the farm and selling the farm. So that could be, we go back to a very old Martha meeting Kara. And then, you know what? We could give Martha a proper send-off in this book. And we could talk about, we could see Superman grieving the loss of his mother, and Kara experience what death on Earth feels like, having gotten these new powers. And I think that would be good, because then you could then go into Superman 4 or 3, and be like, oh, okay, Martha's not around. Like, Clark goes back to Smallville and never go sees his mom for his reunion. But you could say that Superman visits the farm and stays on the farm and doesn't go into Smallville. That makes sense. I don't want to do Lex. I feel like we've used Lex a lot. It could be something unique. That's something that could be some sort of monster that comes from the Phantom Zone, because the Phantom Zone is something we explored in Supergirl, not in Superman. And, he's trying to bring Argo City, and he's unable to do so. And Kara is unable to return because the Megahedron thing is not working. Because, she did return kind of at the end, but a Supergirl movie, but we could say that she comes out again to see her cousin, and he communicates through Kryptonian tech, and during that the Megahedron is destroyed. There's something from the Phantom Zone that comes back with her. I don't know. I'm spitballing here. But the idea is, it's the story that we wanted and were kind of promised as a film, as Superman was supposed to appear in Supergirl, but because of budgetary things, the Soul Kinds being cheap, they did not want to do so. Now you have all these fans of Superman, the movie, and everything, that want to see that character continue on. Now, you do that as the first novel. The second novel would take place after Batman Returns, and it would be the Christopher Reeve Superman meeting Michael Keaton's Batman, which everybody wants to see. Okay, I don't pair the Christopher Reeve Superman up with Adam West Batman. To me, the Christopher Reeve is the start of a new era. Adam West Batman gets paired up with George Reeve, from Adventures of Superman. Those two get paired up together. So you do the novel of Superman meeting Batman. And what really would that look like? That clash of Michael Keaton and Christopher Reeve. Now you think Superman 4 was in what? 87, right? 2 more years, you have Batman. So you can kind of see where they would have crossed paths, okay? That's your second book. Now, who's your antagonist in that? It's a good question. Because if you're looking at everything else that's Batman over here, it's been canonized with villains, who comes back? You know, who's going to take on Batman and Superman 89, 79? That's for the author to find out. I just came up with that idea while I'm pitching this. Because I think that would really give readers a thrill. You know, you have people who love the Keaton Batman who are older who are going to invest in these novels. I mean, they already are. So we have 2 of these Batman ones. And you're building Superman back up and just the character in general. It's not going to hurt to put out a novelization of something that we never got. You know, there's plenty of stories and stuff to pull from. Everybody, the idea of those 2 characters together in that format would make people very happy. Because for some reason, a lot of fans want to look to the past for things. They're not happy with what's current. Everything changes and moves forward, guys. You know, we just do everything now more at a rapid speed. With one thing with George and with Chris is they lasted for decades as character. So they weren't casting immediately. I mean, we talked about this in a previous episode of Krypton Report. If you really look at the last appearance of Henry Cavill, you can argue 2017 or 2022, depending if you want to count the, that little post-credit scene of Black Adam. And, the last film was 2017 in theaters, not counting Zack Snyder's Justice League. So it's either 3 years, to the new casting, or it's like 8 years if you go by, just Superman really in a movie. And you look at 8 years was also between Batman and Robin and Batman Begins. So, but it just seems like the films stay in our collective consciousness more than they had previously because we're constantly being fed these information. So, and I mean, come on. The Dark Knight Rises was 2012. In 2016, we have BVS. So that's a 4-year turnaround. It was almost a 3-year turnaround for new casting and new Batman, new everything. So, and once again, I mean, we got 2 Batmans in 2023. So, and then the Batman in what, 2022? I can't even remember anymore. Or was it 2023? It's 2022. So yeah, we're gonna get another one. So why not write the book? But there's my pitches, okay? Novelization of Superman and Supergirl, and then when Superman meets Batman.